have problems, and all of our problems are personal to each of us. Some of them are shared, meaning that we all experience similar problems, like us going to school and having homework, having to do chores around the house, having children to raise, having jobs to keep, having promotions to earn, etc., etc. But one thing that we all have to do is that we have to solve our problems. And some people search for external resources to help solve their problems, but other people, for various reasons, maybe the problem is very personal, but for a variety of reasons, some people try to solve their problems on their own. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you have the right tools. And that's what I'm going to share with you all today, is another tool of how you can solve your problem on your own. And that is by creating your own characters. This is a very unconventional tool, but it's one that I use personally, and it's one that I have seen be very successful, and I'm going to show you how it can be successful and how you can do this yourself. So whether you know it or not, you actually already know the basic concept of this, and that is with avatars. You know, on Yahoo, those little icons of people's heads, that's the bare essence of an avatar. An avatar is something that represents you outside of yourself. When you can't be there, it's something that represents you, usually in the digital world or outside of your social circle. This type of avatar is much more realistic. This actually looks like a person. It's in a realistic setting. You could believe that this person actually exists, and if somebody were to create this character or this avatar, this would very likely be what somebody would actually look like, and perhaps also represent their hobbies, such as cycling. But another type of avatar is a more fantasy. It's a more fanciful avatar. This is a situation and a world and characters that wouldn't exist at all. Their universes wouldn't exist, their worlds wouldn't exist, their environments wouldn't exist, they wouldn't exist. In this example, Maple World, it's a game in which you need to create an avatar to actually play in the game and explore the world. But even though this clearly wouldn't represent you, it can still represent you in your values, in your perspectives, how you behave, and perhaps it represents you a little bit physically. This basic idea of avatars is the very basic, level of a character. So, for example, an avatar would be perhaps level 1, but a character would be level 2. It's a step up. And the best way to explain this is in some examples. This is a children's book that is meant to explain to children how OCD works. When a child has OCD, the best way to explain it to them, the best way to have them understand, their situation, is to separate the OCD from themselves. So in this example, Mr. Worry, that's this little character right here. It's a very little man dressed up in a suit, and he has some glasses, some spectacles, and a clipboard. And you can see that he's very small in comparison to the little boy. And this is how the artist has decided to interpret a child's OCD and name him Mr. Worry. What this does for the child is that it separates the child and the OCD. Even though OCD is a mental disorder, it's not a physical thing that a child can have, it's something that is occurring within them. It creates a mental distinction, a very subtle distinction, but an important one, because the child will learn to say, the child won't say, I am OCD, the child will learn to say, I have OCD, which is a very important distinction for a child to make, for them to learn how to function with their OCD, not to be controlled by their OCD. Another example is this YouTuber called Thomas Sanders. Used to be a Viner, but since Vine is no longer around, he's had to go exclusively to YouTube. And what he's done on YouTube is that he has created a series called Sandersides. And in this series, it's essentially about Thomas solving his problems, which is a pretty basic storyline. But what he does is that Thomas is the only actor. These are all, it's still all him. What he's done is that he has taken his personality and he has separated it into 4 cores, into 4 main points. He's solidified what he thinks are the 4 things that make up his personality. And for him, that is morality, which also embodies his tendency to be fatherly towards his nieces and nephews, his childlike tendencies, his innocence, and his morality, his sense of right and wrong according to his heart. And that's as opposed to logic, which is his right and wrong according to the mind, according to facts, just logical thinking. This is fantasy, which embodies his fanciful thoughts, his imagination. Thomas does a lot of singing, he does a lot of acting, he does a lot of theater, and this is the character that embodies all of that. It also represents his ego, his eccentricism. And lastly, he has chosen anxiety to represent the last core of his personality. It embodies his worries, his fears, and for him, he has recognized that he is what's called, Thomas, is a habitual worrier, which means that his anxiety plays a part whenever he makes a decision. And so thus he's decided to place his anxiety as one of his core parts of his personality. And what Thomas does is that he takes all these characters, and whenever he has a problem, he puts on the skin of each of those characters, and he solves the problem, and he tries to solve the problem as that character, how that character would look at it, what would that character do? And he does this 4 times. So then after he's done that, he takes a step back and he now can look at this problem. He has now collected 4 different perspectives to solve this problem. And so what he's done is that he has gathered different people's perspectives without actually talking to anybody. And depending on your personality or the type of problem that you have, if it's a very personal problem or a very sensitive problem, this can be a very powerful tool to get somebody else's help without actually having to talk to anybody else. So how to do this, how to create your own characters is not something that anybody can teach you, but is something that I can give you tips on. What you should be looking for. You can go the fanciful route, like Maple's story, and put your character in a situation that is completely different from yours. You would never be in this situation wouldn't even exist. But for some people, having your character particularly disconnected from you can make it seem like that character is that much more of a different person. And thus you can get that much more different a perspective whenever you're trying to solve a problem. It can also be more down to earth. You can still give your character characteristics that you don't have. For example, maybe you don't play the violin, but you give your character the ability to play the violin, just to have something different. Again, to disconnect your character from yourself so you can have a different perspective. In my own examples, I have given this character, my kind of my eccentrics, my joy, sometimes a little annoying and overbearing. And this character I have given my pessimism, workaholic, worries about how other people perceive him. And what I can do is that I can take these 2 characters and and I can put on their skin, and I can see my problem from their perspective, and thus gain the different perspectives that can help me solve my problem. Now, you can do this either to actually help solve your problems, or you can just do it for fun, because developing a character is fun, and for whatever reason that you do this for, it should always be personal, and don't let your fear of judgment stop you from creating your own characters.